Hello to everybody. Please take your seats. And we start our second morning session. Well, I'm Alexei Bodrov, rector of St. Andrew's Biblical Theological Institute in Moscow. We are one of 8 co-sponsors for this conference, and it's great pleasure to cooperate with the Wolu Academy in organizing this conference. The conference theme is certainly difficult and one of the most painful questions for contemporary Orthodoxy. Relations between Orthodox ecclesiology and nationalism are very important for Greece. It's highly important for Russia and for some other countries that we call Orthodox. These relations create a serious challenge for the Church in our postmodern era. There is a great need for orthodoxy, both at the universal and at local levels, to face the challenge. And it's very good that the Wolu Academy took the initiative to organize this conference. Special gratitude should be expressed to Metropolitan Ignatius, who supported the idea and made great contribution to its development. And of course, to Dr. Kalaitsidis, director of the Wolu Academy and the principal conference organizer. His several papers on the nationalism challenge and other important issues of contemporary Orthodox theology translated into Russian provoked serious interest and discussion in Russia. I hope that discussions at this conference and later its proceedings will produce good impact on ecclesiastical consciousness in the Russian Orthodox Church, and will help to overcome some ideological prejudices that Metropolitan Ignatius mentioned yesterday. And it's my great pleasure to introduce 3 distinguished speakers for this second morning session. Well, I think I will introduce them one by one. So the first is Dr. Bosko Bojevic. He was born in Belgrade, Serbia. He has studied philosophy and history in Belgrade and Paris, where he earned his doctorate degree from the Paris Panthéon Sorbonne University. He has been director in many institutes of Balkan studies, and he has also taught for several years in universities of Belgrade and Paris. He has published more than 10 books, such as Idéologie monarchique dans les hagiobiographie dynastie du Moyen Âge serbe, and several other books. I won't read in French, sorry. Yes, it's concerned with Balkan studies. And European Center of Peace and Development of the University for Peace, established by United Nations in Belgrade 2011, and many articles in international journals. Well, please, you're welcome. Thank you.
Ah, merci. J'espère que vous ne m'en voudrez pas trop d'utiliser le français pour ma communication sur les églises et les sociétés dans le sud-est européen. À l'issue de la période communiste, l'impact des églises dans les pays du sud-est européen est un fait de société que les structures politiques doivent prendre en compte. À l'exception de la Grèce, mais aussi de la Roumanie, bien que dans une moindre mesure, la pratique religieuse, traditionnellement aléatoire, y était pourtant devenue particulièrement déficiente. Ce n'est que peu d'années avant l'effondrement des démocraties populaires que l'on a pu constater un accroissement significatif des manifestations de religiosité. Ceci notamment dans les régions de population et surtout de confession mixte. Phénomène corollaire à l'échec de l'idéologie dominante, le retour des églises sur le devant de la scène publique, bien que de forte ampleur, se situe dans une continuité récurrente dans cette partie de l'Europe où la faible structuration de la société, dotée d'une mince couche d'élite, est compensée par l'effet de cohésion en provenance des structures ecclésiastiques ou confessionnelles, religieuses. Le cas de l'ex-Yougoslavie est particulièrement significatif à cet égard. Alors que les conflits armés se sont à chaque fois déroulés dans le triangle interconfessionnel, les tensions intercommunautaires s'intensifient périodiquement au sein de la même confession aussi. Ces tensions entre hiérarchies ecclésiastiques sont issues d'un conflit d'ordre canonique entre l'Église autoproclamée dans les années 60 de Macédoine, de l'époque de Tito, avec l'Église de Serbie. Depuis quelques années, le phénomène s'étend aussi au Monténégro, même si dans ce cas, il présente un caractère presque caricatural du fait de la faible adhésion du public, d'une certaine ambivalence du pouvoir politique, ainsi que du manque de représentativité de la petite poignée d'ecclésiastiques qui s'efforcent de créer une église nationale. Surtout après la séparation de Monténégro avec la Serbie. En absence de tout projet de société, en proie à une déstructuration économique, sociale, morale, dans une crise de conscience majeure, les populations se tournent vers les églises tout en aspirant à un véritable changement par opposition à une laïcité totalitaire qui a conditionné tous les segments de la vie durant un demi-siècle. Marginalisés et refoulés, sans ménagement, loin de la vie publique durant cette période, soudainement propulsés au devant de la scène publique, les hiérarchies des églises y étaient peu préparées. Consciemment ou non, ils s'y sont retrouvés en fonction d'une logistique idéologique des régimes populistes des années 90 et plus ou moins pseudo-démocratiques actuellement. C'est ainsi que dans les pays en transition, sous couvert de rhétorique démocratique, on assiste à une sorte de cléricalisation de la société sous forme de sécularisation de l'Église, des églises ou des communautés confessionnelles. Issus des processus de longue durée, ethnarchie à l'époque ottomane, romantisme national du XIXe siècle, le détournement de la religion à des fins idéologiques, le jumelage de l'Église et de l'État ont acquis des formes particulièrement avancées au XXe siècle pour aboutir au paroxysme de la période post-communiste avec une cléricalisation populiste des sociétés déchristianisées ou désislamisées. La plus grande partie de l'histoire de cette partie de l'Europe s'est déroulée dans le cadre des États multinationaux. L'État-nation y est une institution relativement récente, d'où aussi le décalage avec lequel la plupart des pays balkaniques accèdent au processus d'intégration de l'époque actuelle. Les faiblesses des institutions démocratiques, les balbutiements de la société civile et de l'économie du marché, le vide juridique qu'accompagne la privatisation, font que ces pays en transition accusent un retard notable dans les processus de modernisation. L'émergence d'une société civile se traduit néanmoins par un début de critique et de contestation du conformisme ambiant au sein même de l'Église nationale. Cette évolution significative se produit dans un contexte de différenciation où l'on assiste en même temps à l'alliance des structures les plus conservatrices. Même si de tels frémissements ne touchent actuellement que les pays les plus engagés vers l'évolution dans un type de société ouverte, des signes avant-coureurs laissent supposer une prochaine mutation similaire dans le reste de cette partie de l'Europe. La structure démographique des populations du sud-est européen se différencie du reste de l'Europe par sa plus grande hétérogénéité ethnique et confessionnelle. Comprenant la Roumanie, la Bulgarie, la Grèce, l'Albanie, ainsi que les pays de l'ex-Yougoslavie, Serbie, Monténégro, Croatie, Bosnie, Herzégovine, Slovénie, Macédoine, Fyrom, à proprement parler, mais aussi la partie européenne de la Turquie, pour une superficie totale de 788 500 km². Le sud-est européen compte plus de 19 millions d'habitants. Tenant compte de critères confessionnels, cette population est répartie de manière fort disparate. Toujours selon ce critère de cohérence, on peut distinguer deux groupes de pays. Ce sont d'une part des pays à forte majorité confessionnelle, comprenant environ ou au moins plus de 80 ou 90% de majorité confessionnelle, à savoir, ce sont la Grèce, 98, la Croatie 96, après l'expulsion des Serbes, la Slovénie 92, la Roumanie 87, la Bulgarie 82, sans oublier la Turquie européenne, proche de 100%, c'est-à-dire 89,8% de majorité musulmane. À savoir que jusqu'en 1915, la Turquie avait environ 33% de population chrétienne. Et d'autre part, des pays où la majorité confessionnelle est plus proche de la mixité que d'une majorité qualifiée. Ce sont donc l'Albanie, environ, les chiffres officiels n'existent pas, ce sont des estimations, pour l'Albanie en tout cas, environ 70%. Fyrom, environ 70%. Les chiffres sont controversés entre les deux communautés principales, slaves et albanaises. La Serbie, et avec le Monténégro, environ 65%, y compris les cas particuliers de la Bosnie-Herzégovine, avec sans majorité qualifiée en fait, avec 40% de musulmans, 31% d'orthodoxes, 15%, enfin maintenant plutôt 11%, selon le dernier recensement des catholiques, et 14 autres, où aucune majorité absolue n'a donc pu se dégager, ainsi que du Kosovo, territoire sous protectorat encore d'une certaine manière onusien, où la majorité islamique devrait désormais se rapprocher de, enfin, plus de 90%. Le dernier recensement, en fait, est aussi sujet à caution. Le sud-est européen, dans son ensemble, et selon les pays qui en font partie, compte plus de 67,4 millions d'habitants, sans la Turquie d'Europe. Avec 46 millions de chrétiens orthodoxes qui représentent 70% de la population de la région, le reste étant réparti de manière presque égale entre catholiques romains, un peu moins de 15%, et musulmans, un peu moins de 14%. Ces proportions seraient tout autres si on incluait la population turque européenne, naturellement, ce qui aurait fait de tripler la population musulmane. La croissance démographique de ces populations, de ces trois communautés principales, à savoir les chrétiens orthodoxes, les catholiques et les musulmans, est la suivante. Depuis les 80 dernières années, depuis les années d'où le recensement existe systématiquement dans cette région, et elle est de 100% pour les orthodoxes, ce qui représente la moyenne européenne, comme la Suisse, de 50% pour les catholiques et de 200% pour les musulmans. Concernant les Balkans occidentaux, modèle de stéréotypes souvent qualifiés par Balkan et balkanisation, actuellement désignés le plus souvent par Balkans occidentaux, comprenant en fait les pays de l'ex-Yougoslavie, sans la Slovénie et avec l'Albanie. Cette partie du sud-est européen est d'autant plus significative pour une enquête sur les structures confessionnelles dans la perspective des sociétés en transition. D'autant que cette partie de la région accuse un retard significatif dans les processus d'intégration européenne, et ceci même par rapport aux autres parties du sud-est européen. Tant et si bien qu'on peut se demander s'il n'y aurait pas une relation de cause à effet avec l'hétérogénéité ethno-confessionnelle dont je viens d'esquisser les contours. La conjonction traditionnelle entre confession et ethnicité est actuellement un puissant facteur de cohésion communautaire et identitaire. Le fait confessionnel étant le dénominateur communautaire traditionnellement plus déterminant en ce sens. Faisant suite à l'effondrement des idéologies de classe, sous-tendant la faiblesse des institutions civiles et des traditions démocratiques, à l'ambiguïté des frontières et des institutions étatiques issues principalement des grandes guerres du XXe siècle, l'imbrication des populations et l'héritière, des grands États globalisateurs et fédérateurs des époques antérieures. C'est ainsi que, confrontés aux différences ethniques et confessionnelles, les empires ottomans et autrichiens ont favorisé, chacun à sa manière, les recoupements intégrateurs selon des critères confessionnels, tout en favorisant les confessions officielles pour des raisons politiques et idéologiques. Le système de millet ottoman subordonnait le critère ethnique à l'appartenance confessionnelle, créant ainsi une hiérarchie de communautés confessionnelles, les musulmans étant la communauté dominante, suivie de la communauté orthodoxe, juive, catholique, etc. Corollaire à la longue agonie de l'Empire ottoman, la création des États-nations au XIXe siècle s'articule autour de la restauration des droits historiques et des appartenances ethniques et confessionnelles. Les États aux populations plus homogènes eurent moins de difficultés à se constituer. Ce fut le cas de la Grèce, de la Serbie, enfin de la Bulgarie, au cours du XIXe siècle. Les pays qui avaient moins d'homogénéité confessionnelle et ethnique ne se formèrent que vers le début du XXe siècle. Ce fut le cas de l'Albanie, puis de la Yougoslavie. De l'Albanie en 1912, de la Yougoslavie en 1918. C'est sans doute pourquoi telle ou telle forme de laïcité fut privilégiée dans les deux pays. Issu d'empires multiethniques et confessionnellement hétérogènes, l'Albanie adopta en 1967 un athéisme exclusif et militant dans sa période d'isolation communiste, alors que la Yougoslavie avait adopté une forme de jacobinisme laïcisant dès sa fondation à l'issue de la Première Guerre mondiale. Si l'intégration des populations de cette monarchie constitutionnelle n'a pu évoluer vers une cohésion plus importante dans une Europe gangrénée par les idéologies totalitaires de l'entre-deux guerres mondiales, ce fut aussi en raison de la faiblesse des institutions démocratiques et autres, ainsi que par le caractère ethnique traditionnel ou dû à l'artifice sud-slave, au détriment d'un contrat social et d'un État citoyen. Constat encore plus largement applicable à la Yougoslavie fédérale et communiste, mais aussi aux États qui en sont issus, bien qu'avec des nuances plus ou moins importantes et à des degrés différents. Le communautarisme et l'ethnicité qui caractérisent les sociétés sud-est européennes font que les pays de la région ont toujours eu beaucoup de difficultés à mettre en œuvre les processus de modernisation. La conjonction entre communautarisme religieux et ethnique y a donné lieu à des fractures et à des frictions identitaires particulièrement difficiles à gérer. Réfractaires à toute évolution vers une société civile et libérale, les nomenclatures communistes ont surexploité les archétypes ethnocentriques, particulièrement au cours de la période du déclin de l'idéologie marxiste. La fin des idéologies a par contre propulsé sur le devant de la scène le phénomène religieux. L'ampleur et la fulgurance de la résurgence des confessions et des églises dans les sociétés en transition demeurent d'une envergure telle qu'il convient de lui accorder la signification d'une affinité élective sur le plan politique et même d'une resocialisation communautaire à l'échelle ethno-confessionnelle. Le crédit dont disposent les autorités religieuses étant inversement proportionnel à celui dont jouissent les politiques post-communistes. On assiste à une idéologisation de la religion ayant pour effet la création d'un consensus social en contrepartie de la déstructuration des institutions héritées de la période communiste. Avec sa diversité confessionnelle, ethnique et culturelle, l'espace ex-yougoslave était d'une certaine manière la dernière survivance de l'Europe du XIXe siècle. Elle fut à bien des égards un succédané de l'Autriche-Hongrie dont elle avait hérité d'à peu près la moitié de son territoire. Alors que cet anachronisme yougoslave fut relégué au profit et perte de l'histoire récente, les restructurations ethno-confessionnelles n'ont pas encore fini de définir la carte des États émergents dans cette partie de l'Europe. Les trois grandes confessions monothéistes traditionnellement implantées dans le sud-est européen situent les clivages locaux sur un plan universel et intercontinental. Ces grandes religions et confessions historiques assurent en principe un facteur de cohésion en transcendant des fractures ethniques et identitaires. Les conflits de la fin du siècle passé se situent essentiellement dans ce triangle confessionnel. La spécificité balkanique réside néanmoins dans la subdivision au sein de ces ensembles confessionnels que sont les églises et autres communautés ethno-confessionnelles, héritées de l'histoire mouvementée de cette partie de l'Europe. Mondial et local, interethnique, interétatique et civile, les guerres qui ont été menées dans les Balkans au XXe siècle ont laissé une empreinte profonde, des blessures douloureuses et des cicatrices indélébiles dans la mémoire des peuples vivant dans cette partie des Balkans, du sud-est européen. Ainsi, la plus grande partie de la région des Balkans est encore dans le cercle fermé de ces contradictions héritées et nouvellement acquises, de sorte qu'il devient synonyme de conflits latents ou non apaisés et encore moins résolus. Le processus de modernisation a entraîné des changements significatifs dans la plus grande partie de l'Europe en ce qui concerne les institutions religieuses et leur hiérarchie. Dans la sociologie moderne des religions, ces changements sont désignés par déréglementation, ce qui implique l'affaiblissement de l'autorité des hiérarchies par rapport aux membres de leur communauté, ainsi que l'importance accrue de l'authenticité par rapport à leur formelle appartenance à une communauté. Cela signifie que le critère de la quantité a été remplacé par mesure de l'appartenance authentique et une participation active dans la vie d'une communauté. Dans un moment de l'individualisme croissant, ce phénomène inévitable ne peut guère épargner les pays en transition. Par conséquent, il est dans l'intérêt des institutions religieuses à accepter le processus de modernisation plutôt que d'offrir une résistance vaine en se tournant vers le traditionnalisme des mythes romantiques du passé, entre autres. Néanmoins, la raison la plus importante qui impose la nécessité de l'implication croissante des institutions religieuses dans la réconciliation et le respect entre les communautés ethno-confessionnelles et de l'État réside dans la confiance dont ils jouissent auprès des plus larges couches de la population. La disparition des grandes idéologies qui ont marqué l'histoire du XXe siècle a créé un vide de sens compensé par voie des circonstances et en majeure partie par les systèmes de valeurs religieuses. La religion a toujours été nécessaire non seulement pour satisfaire le besoin humain de sens, mais aussi pour préserver le consensus social. À cette fin, l'État a également placé des institutions religieuses au service de la stabilité sociale. Affaibli et au vu de son prestige ébranlé, un pays en transition n'a pas d'autre choix que de s'appuyer sur des institutions religieuses afin de maintenir son autorité. Ainsi, les institutions religieuses ont été mises au service de l'ethnoconfessionnalisme, de ralliement et le soutien idéologique des régimes ethnocentriques. Afin d'illustrer cette interaction causale, il est nécessaire de se référer à des données sociométriques. En tant que pays de transition tardive, la Serbie, dans le début du XXIe siècle, peut servir comme un très bon exemple. La décomposition de l'ex-Yougoslavie est corollaire à l'interaction de deux causes premières. L'ethnicisation du parti unique de la Fédération yougoslave d'une part, et le soutien apporté par la communauté des puissances occidentales à l'ethnicisation et au séparatisme qu'elle avait suscité d'autre part. Alors que le régime communiste s'auto-condamnait à une régression généralisée, les Occidentaux apportaient leur appui au nationalisme séparatiste, tout en sanctionnant le populisme serbe du régime post-communiste de Milošević, ainsi que les Serbes de Croatie et de Bosnie, par un embargo et une isolation sans précédent dans l'Europe de la deuxième moitié du XXe siècle. Privé de tout allié et acculé dans ces derniers retranchements, Milošević recourt au soutien de l'Église orthodoxe, repli ultime d'un régime post-communiste aux abois, ce qui n'est pas sans rappeler le recours de Staline au patriotisme et à l'Église orthodoxe au début de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Comme la plupart des églises et autres grandes institutions religieuses historiques dans des périodes de bouleversement majeurs, alors que l'ordre politique et institutionnel vacille, l'Église orthodoxe serbe se croit investie d'une part de responsabilité pour le devenir de son peuple. Il en ressort une relation ambiguë et contradictoire avec le régime en place. Au bout d'une brève idylle à la fin des années 80, dès le début de la décennie suivante, l'épiscopat orthodoxe commence à prendre néanmoins ses distances avec le régime, à commencer par l'évêque Atanasievčić, bientôt suivi de l'évêque de Kosovo Artemije Radosavljević, puis par le métropolite Amfilohije Radović notamment. Parmi les évêques les plus influents, seul un tout petit nombre d'entre eux ne prirent pas de distance avec le régime en place. Le patriarche Paul adopte une attitude plus neutre, sans jamais afficher un soutien explicite à un homme qui n'avait que fort peu d'affinité avec la religion. Après octobre 2000, la hiérarchie ecclésiastique entretient des relations relativement contrastées avec les deux partis démocrates, respectivement de centre-gauche et de centre-droit. Le Premier ministre Đinđić établit une sorte de rapport de force d'une certaine équité, symbolisé par la réintroduction du catéchisme dans les écoles publiques pour la première fois depuis sa suppression par le régime communiste en 1948, mais en partie mis en parité en fait avec l'instruction civique au choix des intéressés et de leurs parents. Avec son populisme mièvre, le régime de Koštunica s'appuie bien davantage sur l'Église, fait mine de s'appuyer sur les évêques les plus influents. En substance, on peut dire que le soutien de l'Église orthodoxe et du métropolite Amfilohije a bien plus profité au régime de Koštunica qu'à l'Église. Depuis le marasme ambiant, résigne la hiérarchie de l'Église à une position désabusée face à une gouvernance du Parti démocrate qui semble cumuler des mauvais points de ses prédécesseurs. Comparé aux grandes églises orthodoxes, comme par exemple l'église russe, l'église orthodoxe serbe est une institution religieuse sensiblement moins soumise à une autorité centrale forte. Le pouvoir de l'évêque diocésain y est relativement plus effectif par rapport à l'autorité centrale. L'église orthodoxe serbe est essentiellement une église épiscopale avec un pouvoir axé sur l'assemblée générale des évêques plutôt que sur celle du Saint-Synode, qui représente l'exécutif. Le consensus obtenu lors de la destitution de Monseigneur Artemie n'en est plus que plus significatif. Selon les recensements effectués en Serbie en 2001, 94% de sa population se déclare comme appartenant à une communauté religieuse. 4,5% ne se déclarent pas comme ayant une appartenance religieuse et seulement 0,5% se déclarent athées. Selon une enquête menée en Voïvodine, le Nord, 60% se déclarent être des personnes religieuses. Dans les années 1980, seulement 20% des répondants se sont déclarés comme croyants. Donc c'est une augmentation absolument énorme. Selon l'enquête menée par le rapport sur le développement humain pour la Serbie, en 2005, 75% de jeunes se déclarent comme appartenant à une communauté religieuse. 46% sont contre le fait d'avoir une mosquée près de leur lieu de résidence. 41% sont contre le mariage avec un Albanais ou une Albanaise. 31% sont contre le mariage avec un musulman. 30% déclarent ne pas accepter un athée comme un partenaire conjugal. 27% en tant que professeur de leur enfant et 17% en tant qu'un partenaire d'affaires. 43% se déclarent rejeter la communication avec les athées, tandis que 57% admettent la communication avec un athée. Donc, comme je l'ai déjà dit, aboli en 1948, l'enseignement religieux a été réintroduit dans la fédération Serbie-Monténégro en 2001, tandis qu'en Croatie et en Bosnie-Herzégovine, ceci a été fait en 1991 et en 1994. Selon l'enquête menée à l'époque où l'enseignement religieux était réintroduit en Serbie, en Monténégro, 81% des élèves se sont déclarés en faveur de l'éducation religieuse dans les écoles, dont 64% ont opté pour l'enseignement religieux comme une matière facultative, tandis que 19% étaient contre. Sur la base de l'échantillon de répondants 635, en 2002, l'enquête a montré que 20% d'entre eux se sont déclarés en faveur de l'éducation religieuse comme une matière obligatoire, 10% pour qu'elle devrait être menée uniquement dans les locaux religieux, tandis que 5% déclarent contre toute éducation religieuse. Selon l'enquête menée en 2003, un an et demi après l'introduction de l'éducation religieuse, 45% des parents et 59% des élèves de secondaire ont accepté le contenu de l'enseignement religieux dans leur intégralité, tandis que 27% des parents et 21% d'élèves ont accepté en partie seulement. Pour les deux catégories, 14% des répondants étaient indécis. Le fait que 74% des parents et 80% des élèves ont accepté donc cet enseignement montre bien qu'il y a là une différence entre les générations. Les données sociométriques sur l'éducation religieuse, plus de 10 ans après son introduction en Serbie, sont encore insuffisantes pour tirer une conclusion plus pertinente, bien qu'il soit admis que l'adhésion à l'éducation religieuse a sensiblement diminué par rapport à son début. Ceci peut être largement attribué à l'interprétation des institutions religieuses, à leur impréparation et à répondre à une telle demande forte, le manque de personnel d'enseignement ainsi de suite, en plus d'une baisse générale de la qualité de l'enseignement, en particulier dans les écoles secondaires. Pour ce qui est de l'adhésion de l'Église orthodoxe et autres communautés confessionnelles, les sondages plus récents, ceux de 2010, corroborent en partie les chiffres de début des années 2000 en Serbie et font état de 93%, une diminution d'1% seulement, de ceux qui se déclarent appartenir à une communauté confessionnelle, alors que 44 déclarent être des croyants, 65 selon d'autres chiffres. D'autres résultats font état de croyances en Dieu bien plus élevés, 60 donc 3, tout en confirmant une tendance à la baisse par rapport aux chiffres des 20 années précédentes. Une pratique religieuse très suivie concerne 4% des sondés. En termes de variables plus qualitatives, le chiffre de 39, 46 selon d'autres études, de ceux qui croient en la résurrection du Christ semble très indicatif. Le fait que 56% ignorent le nom du responsable de leur communauté confessionnelle indique bien, en revanche, le haut degré de dérégulation par rapport aux hiérarchies religieuses, avec en plus 96% de non-pratiquants. La Serbie se reproche bien plus des moyennes européennes. Le bouleversement des 30 dernières années révèle une montée en flèche de la religiosité qui évolue de 1/5 en 82 jusqu'à 3/4 dans les années 2000. Ceci est d'autant plus significatif que le retournement le plus fulgurant se produit en à peine une dizaine d'années, entre le milieu des années 80 et le début des années 90, période au cours de laquelle l'attitude favorable envers le fait religieux a quintuplé chez les hommes en quelques années. C'est la période de l'éclatement de la Yougoslavie. Concernant le sujet que nous intéresse le plus en l'occasion présente, il est aussi significatif qu'inattendu que 55% estiment que l'appartenance ethnique et confessionnelle ne sont pas interdéterminantes. Ce chiffre semble d'autant plus élevé que le taux d'intolérance ethnique est bien trop important. Entre 40 et 54% ne souhaitent pas se marier aux Albanais, Croates ou Gitans. Le fait que 54 soient favorables à une adhésion à l'Union européenne, 53 aux valeurs d'une société sécularisée, ainsi que d'autant au dialogue écuménique et interreligieux, ne font que confirmer le caractère non univoque des choix et des opinions en Serbie contemporaine. Ainsi, un mélange entre modernité et retour aux sources se dégage de ces récents sondages d'opinion. La réconciliation de ces communautés d'appartenance essentiellement formelles est l'enjeu qui pourrait être celui de l'avenir des confessions des pays en transition. L'ethnocentrisme est une tentation majeure pour l'Église ainsi que pour les autres institutions religieuses. Elles en sont surtout l'instrument et à terme victime. L'écrivain croate Miljenko Jergović désignait le sanglant conflit dans son pays, la Bosnie, comme une guerre de religion engagée entre les athées. De l'appartenance formelle, sinon factice, à une adhésion authentique, le décalage semble quasiment abyssal. L'ethnocentrisme n'est pas le seul obstacle à toute expression de spiritualité authentique, étant sans doute à son origine le cléricalisme en tant qu'anachronisme bureaucratique en est tout autant et peut-être encore plus encore. Je termine par une citation que j'aurais pu mettre au début. Le temps s'accomplit et c'est la 12e heure où nos représentants ecclésiastiques doivent cesser d'être exclusivement des serviteurs du nationalisme pour devenir prêtres et évêques de l'Église, une sainte, catholique et apostolique. De Justin Popović. Merci.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boyevich, for your clear presentation, clear picture of religious situation in Southeastern Europe, which is, of course, extremely valuable for our discussions and relations between churches and state and nations. And we now go to our second presentation by Dr. Daniela Kalkandieva. She is a researcher in the Scientific Research Department at Sofia University. In 2004, she defended her doctoral dissertation dealing with ecclesio-political aspects of the international activities of the Moscow Patriarchate in 1917-1948. Since then, she has participated in various projects on the history of Eastern Christian churches and societies. From 2007 to 2009, she was responsible for the research area Orthodoxy as a partner in the international project Religions and Values, Central and Eastern European Research Network, supported by 6th Framework Program of the European Commission. And her list of publications includes a comparative analysis on church-state relations in Eastern Orthodoxy concepts, models, and principles. Also, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church and the ethics of capitalism, and pre-modern Orthodoxy, church features and transformations, and the Bulgarian Orthodox Church and the Cold War. And title of her paper is Orthodoxy and Nationalism in Russian Orthodoxy. You are welcomed.
Thank you. So I would like to thank you to the Wolu Academy and its partners for giving me this opportunity to take part in the conference dealing with such a burning issue for contemporary Orthodoxy. So my paper explores the relationship between Orthodoxy and nationalism in the Russian Orthodox tradition. It employs the term Orthodoxy when referring to Eastern Orthodoxy in general, while using Russian Orthodoxy to signify the historically constructed specificities of Christianity in the Russian lands. On its turn, the term nationalism is approached as a modern phenomenon that doesn't simply reflect a national identity, but becomes an ideology that, by equating nation with state, has the potential to bring mass political mobilization on historical and cultural grounds. In the case of Orthodoxy, however, there is a widespread view that nationalism is an inherited feature of this branch of Christianity. Therefore, I concentrated my effort to specify when exactly the symbiosis between Orthodoxy and nationalism appeared in Russian Orthodoxy, to trace its evolution and its major concepts. In this respect, there are several features that are blamed to be for the development of an expansionist Russian Orthodox nationalism, mainly the language of liturgy, and the Cyrillic alphabet, the model of church-state relations, and the Russian Orthodox Church itself. I'll start with a few comments on the first two. Concerning the language and alphabet, I'll share the view of Piotr Bitsili, who considered that the cultural differentiation between the Orthodox Slavonic and the German Latin world wasn't provoked by the great schism between the churches of Rome and Constantinople, but by the Cyrillic alphabet. The latter made possible for Orthodox Slavs to become preachers and teachers or judges without learning Greek and Latin. As a result, these churchmen remained ignorant about the ideas of antiquity, while their colleagues in Byzantium and Western Europe adopted them in the course of their studies. This is why, despite the great schism, the Orthodox Greeks preserved closer relations with the Western Christianity, while the Orthodox Slavs remain somehow isolated. From this perspective, the Cyrillic alphabet and the Church Slavonic liturgical language have promoted a kind of Slavonic Orthodox internationalism rather than Russian nationalism. Concerning the church-state relations, Most scholars regard the symbiosis of orthodoxy and nationalism in many Eastern European countries as a result of a specific model of these church-state relations defined as Caesaropapism. Some of them even claim that it existed since the baptism of Kievan Rus. Such statements, however, are at variance with history. Until 1448, the metropolitans of Kiev, Until 1448, the metropolitans of Kiev were appointed by the Patriarch of Constantinople, and thus they didn't depend on the Kievan princes. Then in the next period, until 1569, when the Metropolitan of Kiev became Patriarchate of Moscow, the metropolitans of Kiev acted independently from the Patriarchate of Constantinople, but still they enjoyed many freedoms as allies of the Muscovite princes in their efforts to unite all Russian lands under Moscow control. Despite the relatively harmonious church-state relations established in the first patriarchal period, the conflict of Patriarch Nico with the Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich reveals that the church has ambition to claim authority over the Tsar, and not to forget that the first Russian Tsar from the Romanov dynasty, Mikhail Fyodorovich, actually during his reign, his own father was Patriarch Filaret. Under certain conditions, the use of term Caesaropapism makes sense for the synodal period, when it was introduced in Russian historiography by Pavel Milyukov, who borrowed it from another political and religious reality and thus put it in quotation marks. Still, the westernizing drive of Peter the Great and his choice to appoint as synodal members mostly hierarchs born and educated in Little Russia made impossible to accuse both Peter or the Russian Church of nationalism. The first nationalistic tendencies in Russian Orthodoxy appeared during the reign of Elizabeth Petrovna. In 1754, she issued a decree that seized the practice only clergy from Little Russia to be consecrated as bishops and ordered the promotion of Great Russians. Soon the latter became majority in the Russian Synod. Therefore, the marriage between Orthodoxy and nationalism in Russia seems to have been contracted in the second half of the 18th century. In this sense, we can define this time as a turning point in Russian Orthodoxy, when the Catholic nature of the Eucharist yielded to great Russian nationalism. This modern symbiosis of Orthodoxy with great Russian nationalism was demonstrated many times in the course of the territorial expansion of the Russian Empire in the 19th century. For example, during the partition of Poland, or when the Georgian kingdom and the Georgian church were incorporated in Russia. From the perspective of our conference, however, the most significant question concerns the Russian Orthodox Church as a key factor for the rapprochement of Orthodoxy with nationalism. In this respect, we need to differentiate between the role of Orthodoxy in shaping the Russian national identity and the expansionist symbiosis of Russian Orthodoxy with great Russian nationalism. The former is a process which roots go back in the time of the baptism of Kievan Russia, and I would define it as a positive nationalism, while the latter, which is the main subject of this paper, took place in the last 2 centuries, and I defined it as negative nationalism. Not less important questions are raised by the concept of Russian Church. Although today we use the terms Russian Church and Patriarchate of Moscow as synonyms, they have different connotation. The former points to certain national dimensions of this body, while the latter stresses its ecclesiological aspects and reflects the early Christian practice to name the church after the city where its bishop stays, and not after the name of an empire, a kingdom, or nationality. In addition, from a canonical point of view, the use of the term Russian Church could be problematic when discussing the development of the Metropolitanate of Kiev under Constantinople jurisdiction. In historical terms, however, the 13th century Mongol invasion, the transfer of the office of the Metropolitan of Kiev to Moscow in the 14th century, the coincidence of the rise of the Moscow Principality with the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople provoked a new attitude to the Metropolitanate of Kiev or Moscow that assisted its perception as a Russian church. The same circumstances brought to life a new notion of Moscow as well. It began to be viewed as the third Rome, the center of the only true Christian empire, which mission was to protect all Eastern Christians. Still, it would be wrong to see in this 16th century idea the birth of a predecessor of the Soviet state, a notion that became very popular during the late Cold War. According to John Meyendorff, I quote, "On the level of political ideology, the Muscovite Tsars never seriously intended to follow the example of the medieval sovereigns of Bulgaria or Serbia and to establish a new Roman Empire. Therefore, he considered that there was no translatio imperii from Constantinople to Moscow equivalent to that from Rome to Constantinople." Meyendorff also pointed to the loyalty of Russian Tsars to the Church of Constantinople, who asked patriarchal dignity for their church only in 1589. Moreover, the Russians agreed with the fifth position of their patriarchate in the Orthodox Church diptychs. Meanwhile, Moscow recognized the jurisdiction of the Patriarchate of Constantinople over the southwestern Kiev Metropolitanate, a fact that declines the thesis about the Third Rome as a manifestation of some nationalistic dreams of the 16th century Russian Church. The title of the first Russian Patriarch, Yov, was Patriarch of Vladimir and Moscow. This reveals that the concept of the Patriarchate of Moscow as a Russian church was still ambiguous by 1589. I would suggest that the concept of Russian church took shape in the 17th century under the influence of Simeon Polotsky, who proposed the establishment of 5 patriarchates within Muscovite Russia. In his view, if the Greek Roman Empire has had 5 patriarchates, then the same should be valid for the only Orthodox Tsardom in the world. Simeon Polotsky, who was also advisor of Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich and teacher of his son Peter, the future Peter the Great, believed that the ancient patriarchates were not established by ecumenical councils but by the Tsar's will. In this way, the vision of the Russian Church as an imperial church was born. In the end of the 19th century, the symbiosis of Orthodoxy with nationalism found expression in the concept of the Russian Orthodox Church as a private church or частная церковь. According to Evgeny Golubinsky, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Russian Church was an extremely exceptional metropolitanate of the Patriarchate of Constantinople because on the land it was de facto on one hand, it was de facto a whole private church embracing an independent state, while on the other hand, by its large territory, it exceeded not only the entire Patriarchate of Constantinople with all its metropolitanes, but was absolutely equal and maybe almost equal with the whole Greek Church with all its 4 patriarchates. It is within the Ottoman Empire. According to this theory, there is a difference between canons and local rules. Canons are mandatory for all private churches, while local rules for every private church, and they are valid only on their territories. According to Golubinsky, the local rules include not only the decisions and the decrees of the corresponding church leadership, but also, I quote, the laws of that state power under which every private church is situated. Although the anti-religious policy of the Bolshevik regime left no space for the previous symbiosis of Orthodoxy and nationalism in Soviet Russia, the Moscow Patriarchate didn't give up its jurisdiction over its pre-war pre-1914 territories. Upon the restoration of the patriarchal institution, Patriarch Tikhon granted autonomy of the Orthodox churches situated in the newly established states like Ukraine, Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Poland, Lithuania, but firmly rejected any thought about granting them autocephality. In a curious way, the traditional symbiosis of Orthodoxy and nationalism survived outside Russia thanks to the hierarchy that fled abroad after the Bolshevik Revolution. The mass exodus of Russian clergy and laymen after the Bolshevik Revolution wasn't a precedent in the Christian history. In 688, a pagan invasion of Cyprus forced its archbishop and flock to search Muslim in areas situated under Constantinople jurisdiction. Still, the 39th canon of the Queensixtum Council preserved the autocephality of his church and transferred the province of Hellespont under his authority, and this situation lasted until 747. Though the Russian exiles weren't led by Patriarch Tikhon, they insisted on similar treatment with the argument, I quote, that they were a church people of a different nationality that had own traditional style of church life, and its administration by a foreign hierarchy will be difficult. In 1921, they convoked a Russian all-abroad council in Sremski Karlovci that had to unite and regulate the life of the Russian Orthodox diaspora after the interruption of its contacts with the Patriarchal See in Moscow. The council laid grounds of the Russian Orthodox Church abroad and enhanced the symbiosis of Orthodoxy and nationalism in Russian Orthodoxy. The Council's Act not only continued the pre-revolutionary marriage of Russian Orthodoxy with great Russian nationalism, but also developed some new features. The main specificity of the nationalism of Russian Orthodox Church abroad became its fixation on monarchy and dynasty. The Council's participants were unanimous that the question of monarchism, I quote, is a church question and the church must support it. The issue of dynasty, however, split them. The majority, led by Metropolitan Antoni Hrapovitsky, condemned the overthrow of Emperor Nikolai II and any rejection of the Romanov dynasty. They believed that such a behavior would inspire various impostors to claim rights over the Russian throne. In their view, in a time of trouble, it was a duty of the Russian Orthodox Church to indicate at least the dynasty of the next Russian Tsar. Thus, they supported Antony's call for the introduction of regular prayers for all who died for the Orthodox Church, Orthodox faith, Tsar and fatherland. There were, however, 34 deputies who protested against the inclusion of the dynastic question in the Council's resolutions. According to Archbishop Vlogi Georgievsky, this was a political issue and thus out of the sphere of the church competence. Their voice, however, wasn't heard, and the Council issued an appeal that required, I quote, an undisputable recognition of the first son of the Holy Orthodox Church, the lawful and hereditary Russian Tsar, as God's anointed sovereign and bearer of the supreme authority in the state. In short, the restoration of a monarchist and theocratic Russia built on the triangle faith, Tsar, and fatherland became the driving ideal of the Russian Orthodox nationalism in exile. The Council's acts reveal also a strong anti-Bolshevik stand and an isolationist attitude to all non-Orthodox Christians. At the same time, it emphasized the blood, linguistic, and religious kinship of Russians with South Orthodox Slavs and recommended a mass study of Church Slavonic as, I quote, a church language and basis of the Russian and all Slavonic vernaculars. Finally, the Council elaborated a new concept of the Russian Orthodox Church as a part of the Universal Orthodox Church. It reads, the Church is as a historical fact exists in the conditions of space and time. It remains Jacob's ladder, which tops goes into the heaven while stepping on the earth and transferring the heavenly blessing downward to all aspects of human life. Remaining Catholic by its inner essence, an overworldly body, it has been always more or less national in its external manifestation. This is Archbishop Anastasy Gribanovsky. From such a perspective, the existence of national saints as the Serbian Saint Sava or the Russian Saint Sergei Radonezh was regarded as an evidence for an internal national affiliation of the Orthodox churches. This created in exile concept of Russian Orthodox nationalism wasn't fully shared by all parts of the church abroad. Soon the church split in three parts led by Metropolitan Antoni Sremski Karlovci, Metropolitan Evlogi in Paris, and Metropolitan Platon in America. But only the Karlovci Synod continued to support this concept. Meanwhile, the other two distanced themselves from the monarchies and dynastic claims of the concept and abandoned its anti-Catholic and anti-Western principles. In 1938, the Karlovci Synod made an attempt to reunite the Russian Church abroad. It used the 950th anniversary from the baptism of Kiev Rus to convoke the Second Church Council abroad. Therefore, it introduced the idea that the Holy Russian it introduced the Holy Russian unity as a condition for the recreation of Orthodox Great Russia. In his opening speech, Metropolitan Athanasi, then he was already Karlovci leader, stressed the deep esteem of all Rus to the monarchical order as theocratic one. He said, "The Orthodox Church is God's anointed sovereign because he is servant of God, defender of Church and of God's truth on the earth. These were the grounds on which Russia was built, and on the same moral grounds she will strengthen her positions in the future. The Orthodox Russia cannot be restored without the reestablishment and reinforcement of this view and this ideal." He finished with a call for a revival of the ideal of Holy Rus in the soul of every Russian Orthodox man. The task was entrusted to the Saint Prince Vladimir Brotherhood of Christ Holy Rus. According to the Brotherhood statutes, there was a need for the restoration of, I quote, Orthodox Christian Russia, Holy Christ Rus. The same one which was established 950 years ago by Saint Prince Vladimir, bequeathed by him to all generations of Russia and carried by our forefathers for 9.5 centuries. According to the statutes, the Russian Orthodox Church is the only truthful center around which the union of all Russian people is possible. The Russian Orthodox Church is the creator, essence, and life of Russian people. Any other center will need long-lasting explanations and preparations. The unification around the Church doesn't need explanations. The Second Council also developed concepts that continue to influence the interaction of Orthodoxy and nationalism to nowadays. The first of them concerns the concept of local Orthodox Church, in Russian поместные Orthodox churches or territorial churches, regarded as autocephalous bodies that organize their domestic affairs independently from Constantinople. This table shows how Bishop Yuan of Shanghai defined in 1938 the list of the local churches, and then I take those churches which Count Yuri Grabi defined as autocephalous. So, according to the fathers of this new concept of the local churches, the Russian Orthodox Church spreads its canonical jurisdiction not only over the interwar period of the Soviet Union, but also over all those parts that used to belong to the Russian Empire before the First World War. It had also included the states of Estonia, Latvia, Finland, Lithuania, and Poland, as well as Bessarabia. It is interesting that this concept also regarded the Russian population of Subcarpathian Rus, then in Czechoslovakia, as a historical part of the Russian Church. The next concept advanced by the Second Council concerned autocephaly. The interwar suppression of Moscow jurisdiction over over the dioceses that remained outside the inter-Soviet borders increased the sensitiveness of the Russian church leadership at home and abroad to the issue of autocephaly. Its systematic elaboration belongs to Sergei Troitsky and Count Yuri Grabe. Their views were also influenced by the experience of the national Balkan Orthodox churches, which independence was won in a fight with the Patriarchate of Constantinople. According to Sergei Troitsky, a church is autocephalous when it receives its authority not from another church but from the very founder of the church, Jesus Christ, though through the heterotonia of its leader and a rest of its bishops by its own bishops. In his turn, Count Yuri Grabe continued that no church has the right to intervene in the affairs of an autocephalous church or to administrate on its territory. On these grounds, he condemned the interwar activities of the Patriarchate of Constantinople in the territories of Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Poland as an intervention in the affairs of the Russian Orthodox Church. He also pointed to the inconsistency in the behavior of Constantinople while condemning Bulgarian ethnophilism and at the same time supporting the separatist drive of the Orthodox bodies like the Polish Autocephalous Church. The Second Council revived also the idea of Moscow, the Third Rome, but it read it through the lenses of the post-revolutionary experience of the Russian Orthodox Church. The new concept was developed by the legal advisor of the Karlovci Synod, Konstantin Nikolaev. He deduced the new Third Rome concept from the 19th century Russian historiography, particularly from the view that the Moscow ruler was not only a guardian and defender of Orthodoxy in Russia, but also the Tsar of all Orthodox people or nations, as the representative, guardian, and defender of the entire universal Eastern Orthodoxy. According to Nikolaev, by betraying Orthodoxy at the Council of Florence in 1439, the Patriarchate of Constantinople left no other choice to Moscow but to, I quote, to become the guardian of Orthodoxy by entering in century-long struggle with the West for the freedom of Orthodox people wherever they were situated, and defined it as fight for political independence and great statehood, or Великодержавие in Russian. In addition, Nikolaev stressed the Slavonic nature of this new center of Orthodoxy in Moscow. In his view, the fall of Constantinople transferred the mission of Greeks to Slavs and turned Moscow into God's weapon for its fulfillment. Therefore, Nikolaev perceived the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople as the beginning of the universal role of Moscow in the life of the Orthodox Church. He also suggested that the term whenever the Third Rome idea was in decline, it caused an immediate suffering of global orthodoxy. He believed that there cannot be a true liberation of the ancient patriarchal see of Constantinople without a return of the Russian Tsar. Defined by him as the only pretender to the church legacy of the Byzantine Empire. From such a perspective, he considered that the Patriarchate of Constantinople didn't grasp the essence of the Russian church tragedy of 1917. Instead of providing assistance to this church, the Patriarchs of Constantinople began to behave as successor, I quote, a successor of Russian church power and Russian imperial authority, and spread their jurisdiction over the dioceses of the Moscow Patriarchate that remained outside the Soviet borders. Nikolaev criticized the Patriarchate of Constantinople because it was treating the Russian Orthodox diaspora as barbarian people. He declared that though in exile, the Russian emigres will continue to be part of the Russian people and had no intention to replace their mother church with the Church of Constantinople. According to him, the latter was guilty of breaking the 8th canon of the Third Ecumenical Council that banned bishops from intervening in the dioceses of other bishops. In this regard, he discussed the developments in the Baltic states, Finland, and Romania, and said that Orthodoxy in these areas ceased to be Slavonic by spirit and lost its creative meaning. On these grounds, Nikolaev introduced the term Greek papism to characterize the interwar policy of the Patriarchate of Constantinople to the Orthodox population in Eastern Europe. In his view, his views were supported also by Count Grabe, who said that the third canon of the Second Ecumenical Council granted only privilege in horror to the Patriarch of Constantinople, not in authority, and the 28th canon of the Fourth Ecumenical Council simply repeated the previous one and added the exact areas of the territorial jurisdiction of Constantinople. Nikolaev's thesis of Greek papism contained also geopolitical aspects. He defined Serbia and then still schismatic Bulgaria as the major allies of the Russian Orthodox Church in its fight against Greek papism. He also expressed hopes for the revitalization of the Russian Orthodox Church as the biggest Orthodox Church and the only one which has the necessary authority to convoke the Pan-Orthodox Council, at least before the revolution. During the Second Council, Nikolaev also advanced another important thesis about the collapse. According to him, the collapse of the Russian Empire had a disastrous effect not only on the Orthodox world, but also in Christianity in general, including the Catholic world. He stated, I cannot find. He stated, living on a unified territory, unified by its origin, speaking one language and understanding the Church Slavonic language of liturgy, the Russian Orthodox people is a stronger bulwark of Christianity than Catholicism, which has been spread among tribes, people, and states with church services in Latin. When this bulwark had been destroyed, the Catholic world had been also shaken by the events in Spain, Mexico, and Germany, exposed in the internal and external weakness of Catholicism. That exposed the internal and the weakness of Catholicism. This anti-Catholic rhetoric concerned also the Eastern Rite introduced by Vatican in the 1920s as a modification of the previous policy of unions. According to Nikolaev, this policy was demonstrated during the Lvov Uniat Congress in 1936 that connected several Uniat anniversaries. The Second Council ended with the adoption of appeals that shed additional light on the Karlovci contribution to Russian Orthodox nationalism on the eve of the Second World War. One of them is appeal to the Russian people suffering under the Bolshevik regime, and it reads: the Russian Orthodox, the Russian Church. I made some. Okay, somewhere here. Yeah. The Russian Church has become the mother of the Russian people since the first days of Christianity in Kiev and Rus. She brought it together in one organism, blessed and strengthened its statehood, softened and gave Christian spirit to its legislation, fecundated its culture, took the suffering of all humiliated, deprived, and so on. Another appeal was addressed to the Russian diaspora, and it instructed it how to be safe from Catholic proselytism. Those who think that Russia could become non-Orthodox will be bitterly disappointed. Russia has lived and became great through Orthodoxy. Through Orthodoxy, she will revive and will be saved. The doors of Russian people are widely open for all non-Russians who inhabit their lands and give them full freedom to look for the true faith, but the apostasies of Orthodoxy are no more considered sons of Russia and are threatened as traitors of the faith, people, and motherland. The presented summary of the concepts and views developed by the two councils of the Russian Church abroad reveals that many nationalist aspects of Russian Orthodoxy that we usually ascribe to the Russian Orthodox Church in the Soviet Union were de facto developed by the Russian Orthodox diaspora and particularly by the Karlovci Synod. They seem to be influenced not only by the homeland historical development of Russian Orthodoxy, but also by the specific experience of the Balkan Orthodox nations, particularly by their church clashes with the Patriarchate of Constantinople. It turns that many of these concepts were borrowed by Stalin and implemented in his war and post-war policy, and the table here illustrates these developments. Actually, what it seems that the Karlovci Synod had the theoreticians and the concepts, while Stalin took this concept and implemented in his policy. For example, in 1946, he convoked this Unionist Council in Lvov. When the Union Church was united, he revived the idea of the Third Rome. Actually, he spoke about to establish Orthodox Vatican. He also organized this Pan-Orthodox conference in 1948, so on. So, in conclusion, after the Soviet victory in the Second World War, all branches of the Russian Orthodox Church abroad had to reconsider their previous visions about Russian Orthodoxy and nationalism. Meanwhile, many Karlovci concepts were appropriated by Stalin and used in a modified way for the political and ideological ends of his Soviet empire. As a result, the Cold War historiography targeted its criticism against the Stalinist policy of Moscow, the Third Rome, while neglecting its previous readings, the 16th century one that serves the rise of Moscow Principality as unifier of the Russian lands, and the interwar one that called for the restoration of theocratic Russian Empire. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the changes in the political map of this part of the world remind the interwar changes, thus reviving old concepts and notions. Therefore, an objective analysis of impact of Russian Orthodoxy on the post-Soviet alliance of Orthodoxy with nationalism in present-day Russia cannot rely only on our Cold War experience and calls for innovative and deeper research. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your highly illuminating paper presentation of historical relations between Orthodoxy and the nation in Russia. And we now go to our third speaker, Dr. Dimitris Stamatopoulos. He is assistant professor of Balkan and late Ottoman history at the Department of Balkan, Slavic and Oriental Studies in University of Macedonia. He was born in Greece, holds PhD in history from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. He got scholarships from Greek State Scholarship Foundation, as well as the universities of Princeton and Velika Tarnova, Bulgaria. He has written numerous books and articles on the history of the Orthodox population of the Ottoman Empire. His research interests include Bulgarian and Turkish nationalism, the relationship between religion and politics in the Balkans, the formation of power networks in the Ottoman Empire and the Balkan states. And during the academic year 2010-11, he was a member of the School of Historical Studies of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. And among his works are Byzantium after the Nation, the problem of continuity in Balkan historiography, Reform and Secularization toward a reconstruction of the history of the Ecumenical Patriarchate in the 19th century, and others. You're welcome, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will speak in Greek. Θα ήθελα καταρχήν να ευχαριστήσω.
I would like, first of all, to thank His Eminence Ignatius and the Academy for Theological Studies and Mr. Kaladzidis, Dr. Kaladzidis, because they have invited me for the third time to address this conference here at the venue of the Academy for Theological Studies. And should I take this as an indication that my previous two speeches were not as bad? So let us hope that the third speech will be even better. Now, the subject I'm going to present to you, in cooperation with Pandelis, of course, who proposed to me to speak about this subject, is, I believe, a central subject, an emblematic event, the 1872 schism. I believe we all refer to this event in order to understand the Ecumenical Patriarchate and its approach during the 19th and 20th century. Now, beginning my analysis, I would like to make two preliminary remarks that are linked to the discussion that followed after the first panel of speakers. In my opinion, there were two problematic issues of concern. First of all, I don't believe that the problem is whether the orthodoxy has been created in a pre-modernity era and therefore enters into conflict with the Enlightenment. Let me remind you that the fact that someone was against the Western culture in the 19th century or was against the Enlightenment in the 18th century did not necessarily mean that he was against modernity. Perhaps it was the contrary. Perhaps it was the vehicle that he used to enter the world of modernity, and after having done that, to select some specific aspects of modernity. Therefore, since the question is not the fundamental antinomy between the pre-modernity and modernity, but rather the fact that the Orthodox world is in a dialectic relationship with the Enlightenment, therefore I believe that the important thing is to see the historical perspective, the historical content of this dialogue. It has to do more with ecumenism, and in my presentation I use the notion of ecumenicity. I could translate it as the ecumenical ideology of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Let me use this word ecumenicity in this sense and not in the sense used by others today. I believe we should look at ecumenicity as an ideology of the 19th century. So if we stop discussing the conflict during this historical period, but rather we look at the historical content and how this ideological schema was created. But you will perhaps say that ecumenicity is unique, united, and the same throughout history. Well, of course, we have many, and may I say that we could include Confucianism and Islam in the great religions that were created inside great empires. These religions always had an aspect of ecumenicity because the imperium provided the ideological platform of an imperial coexistence. Therefore, what we should analyze is the following. Ecumenicity in the first centuries and ecumenicity in the late Byzantium. Is there a link between these two? ecumenicity in its form in the 16th and 18th century, 17th century, does it have any relationship between with the Millet system in the 19th system? We should also look at the evolution of the Millet system itself. In my opinion, the response is obvious. There have been many important differences. It's not the same. And this is precisely where historical analysis of the differences would be welcome. And so, if we look at ecumenicity as a problem of defining an ideology, we should take into consideration the political context, the conflicts between different groups, different approaches about the way forward for different nations and even for the empire as a whole. Of course, I don't mean to suggest that there is a one-to-one relationship there. I don't mean that ecumenicity is a reflection of what was happening in the Ottoman Empire. However, the Ottoman Empire was a context, a political context that needs to be taken into consideration. So, with these introductory remarks, I would like to start my presentation on the definition of Orthodox ecumenicity. The first idea, which I do not subscribe to it, but however, we could try to define ecumenicity as something that has survived survival from a pre-modern era. Under this approach, we could adopt the view of Mr. Kitromilidis about a fundamental incompatibility between ecumenicity and orthodoxy. But in the ecumenicity and nationalism, However, it is clear that during the 19th century, nationalists used orthodoxy as a tool to further their own objectives. And of course, this did not happen in void. It did not happen without the collaboration of the religious authorities. In fact, these authorities have collaborated with nationalists because, in fact, these nation states would be a sanctuary for them at the time. But if someone was to look only at the aspect of this use of orthodoxy by nationalism, I believe that we would not understand the political tradition, the tradition of political management inside the Orthodox Church. And I believe that during my presentation this will become more clear. A second approach would be the following. That is the adoption of the ecumenical ecumenicity by Greek Orthodoxy. This is also a way. This is the instrumentalization using religion to further my aims. This was the second approach. A third approach would be the reverse of the second one. Here, instead of having an instrumentalization, we'll have an identification of ecumenicity with a form of cosmopolitanism. I would say that this is today something that is happening. I would even go as far as to say that there are some links to the announcement of the conference to this idea. But is this postmodern ecumenicity linked or not to national identity, to national ideology? What I mean to say is that national ideology should not only be seen as a romantic, from a romantic point of view. We know that during the 19th century, nationalism had a romantic aspect, seeking human relationships with brothers, seeking homogeneity in the states that will be formed, but there is also equality, transforming society and getting away with, stopping rather, the privileges of kings and other such privilege. Therefore, this part of nationalism is linked, is taking aspects from Enlightenment, and at the same time is asking for a form of ecumenicity. If the Orthodox Church has criticized what has been a tool for forging national states, and if you want to distance yourself, if the Orthodox Church wants to distance itself from that, perhaps it would be beneficial to see the importance of the egalitarian aspects of ecumenicity. Of course, this should not be done in an automatic way. There needs to be a self-conscious exercise and understanding the ideology with which you are in dialogue, that is nationalism. So that would be the three approaches to ecumenicity to which I am critical. Let me now give you my view, my interpretation of the 19th century ecumenicity. That ecumenicity was created in the Patriarchate from specific groups of intellectuals. And in my view, it had a very specific aim to marginalize extreme nationalist groups. This is what happened in 1872. Not only the Bulgarians, not only the Romanians, not only other forms of nationalism that were presented today, but most importantly, Greek nationalists. Should we interpret the schism as a result of the control that the Patriarchate was, of the fact that the Patriarchate was being controlled by the Greek nationalists? If we do this, we will not understand why the other nationalists present in Constantinople are blaming the Patriarchate for its choice. Nationalism was already present. It didn't need the Patriarchate to spread itself. But when analyzing the history of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, one should be very careful about the fact that we use a singular term, but the reality is different. We have a Patriarchate that was composed of many different political groups or even interest groups, and each of these groups had different goals, political goals and objectives. And at different times, one group managed to impose their will on the others. And it is important to see how the different groups that were present in the Patriarchate understood the issue of nationalism. From a methodological point of view, we need a unified perspective. However, we will not be able to understand and explain contradictory behaviors. We will not be able to explain, for example, why there are inside the Patriarchate groups that use alternatively one time nationalist ideology and at other times an ecumenical ideology. For them at the time that might have been clear, but for us right now studying that era, we should not see ecumenicity as an imperial strategy trying to marginalize nationalism. That was my first point. My second one has to do with the way in which ecumenicity was trying to integrate different streams of thought, different ideological movements that was trying to, and there are several things that have been feeding into ecumenicity. The first one is the imperial context. The second one is the fact that there is a pan-Orthodox strategy to be applied, the relationship with other Orthodox and especially Russia. And the third one is the Greek nationalism. But I believe that the first two factors are the most important ones. But there is a contradiction here. Ecumenicity is trying to recreate, to integrate the imperial with the pan-Orthodox. But until the crisis of 1875 to 78, these two currents of thought were fighting each other. Let us not examine the Crimean War, but even up until the Crimean War, if you apply a pan-Orthodox approach and go towards the Russians, you should not forget that the Russians are still thinking about invading Constantinople and creating the third Rome and in Moscow. If, on the other hand, we adopt a more imperial approach, you might think a strategy towards the Ottomans, a better strategy towards the Ottomans to stop the Russians. Therefore, right before the schism, that is in the transition of the Ottoman Empire from the Ottoman ideology to pan-Islamism, these two approaches were contradictory. When at the time Russia decided that they do not want to interfere with the Balkans anymore, when they started to look more towards Vladivostok and not towards the Balkans, then the Ecumenical Patriarchate had the opportunity to follow a more moderate policy and create an ideological schema of ecumenicity and reconstruct something combining these two contradictory strategies. However, the three approaches that I'm not in favor of and the two approaches that I'm proposing, we need to see how these five approaches have affected the different generations of Greek historiographers, because this subject we're discussing is very important for Greek historiography since the 19th century up until today, and different historians have adopted different interpretations. As Mr. Kitromilidis said, classical historiography in the 19th century believed that the Orthodox Church during the Ottoman Empire was the cradle of the nation, the cradle that helped Greece survive in these difficult times. But they were referring to the cradle of all Greeks, not the cradle of the Greek nation. So I would say that this prompted some literary scholars, such as Ioannis Kakridis or Dimaras, who started from the difference between the genos and the nation, go to the aspect of the difference between Hellenes and Greeks and Romani. These are the first to challenge for the first time this interpretation of ecumenicity. After them, we have the 70s and 80s generation. This is a generation of historians that studied in the West. They knew right from the start what liberalism is and did not. They had a first-hand experience. They were not experiencing it in the periphery. And they were able to conduct specific case studies on the Ottoman Empire, to work on specific issues, taking advantage of the challenge, of the criticism of the first, so to speak, generation, and go even further. And I would refer to the works of Mr. Veremis or Evangelos Kofos, or also the important work of Mr. Kitromilidis for more than 3 decades now. In the work of these historians, there is a common factor, a common point. And what is this common factor? Let us forget this game of nationalizing Greek populations in the boundaries of the Greek state of the 19th century. Let us rather see how Greek Orthodox populations were transformed during the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, let us focus more on Constantinople rather than what Athens did. So what this generation of historians did was to create a methodological bipole between Athens and Constantinople. Perhaps they did not understand the opposition at the beginning, but they created a context in which Athens was nationalist and Constantinople was ecumenical. This changed our perspective. This deconstructed our first model, this binary model, deconstructed the previous model that was created in the 19th century. Because including Constantinople created a new perspective. After that, in the 90s, there is a new generation of historians, including me, who are trying to see whether these two, whether this binary relationship was so clear, whether there was such a big difference between Athens and Constantinople, or whether there were some kind of relationship between them, whether they also instrumentalized orthodoxy, either in the Greek state or in the Ottoman Empire. Now, in this perspective, we had many different points of views. My view is that the problem of orthodoxy and nationalism should be seen in the imperial context, therefore in relation to ideologies such as Ottomanism and Pan-Islamism. Another approach made a mistake and focused on the schism. What is the schism? It is the result of Greek nationalism. They did the schism with the Bulgarians, not with the Greeks, and that means that the Patriarchate is nationalist in itself. That was their mistake. But in order to understand the character of the Patriarchate at that point of time, in the 1860s, when the Bulgarian issue was being important, we need to see what groups constituted the Patriarchate and which of patriarchs had relations, let's say, binary relations with these groups. There is the Vogoridis group. He was related to Mousouros. And when Vogoridis died, Mousouros took the lead of that group. This group was related to the Anthimos VI, the Patriarch. he came for the last time in 1871. That was the first group. The second group, related to the Russians, the Aristarchis group, who are linked to Gregorius V, who is trying to resolve the issue in an amicable way. And the third group is Mise Yannis Psycharis, the grandfather of an important Greek literary scholar, who led the group up until Zarifis took over. But during the same period, we need to keep in mind that these three groups, let us say that there was a confrontation between the tough and the more moderate groups in the Greek side, was reflected also in the Bulgarian side. There were tough groups and moderate groups in the Bulgarians as well. For example, the moderates wanted the exarchy to retain its name because they would need to continue to refer to the Patriarchate. On the other hand, there is a more tough group that wanted their own mixed council, their own autonomous church, etc. So there is this division towards the Bulgarians failed. Yes, of course, there was a tough side from the Bulgarian side, but at the same time, there are many different groups inside the Patriarchate, and their own conflicts have led to the fact that the moderates could not succeed in their effort. There are groups, for example, who place as a most important issue the expropriation of monastery property in Moldavian Wallachia. There is another group that places as a first issue on their agenda the Bulgarian issue. So when we have Gregory VI becoming the Patriarch for the second time and trying to resolve the issue, he is a friend of the Russians and he is a friend of the Bulgarians. He provides them with two alternative plans. However, he is undermined. He faces a strong opposition that is asking him to take a stronger and more tough position towards the Bulgarians from the two groups that I've just mentioned. So in 1870, we have the recognition of the Bulgarian Exarchate, and Gregorius VI asks for an ecumenical council. But that would be very difficult because that would mean that the Patriarch of Moscow would have to come to Constantinople, and that is something that the Ottoman Empire would never accept. Therefore, proposing an ecumenical council was a way of not having a solution, of not resolving the problem. And we come to 1971. After the failure of the Aristarchis Gregorius group, we have the Mousouros group taking the lead. Anthimos becomes the patriarch, but this is not the only development. We have the first election of an exarchate from the Bulgarian side. And as you know, he was Hilarion of Lovens, of Luftu. He was really from the tough side. And the Krestovich Mousouris side deposed him and led the election of a more moderate exarchate with whom they could discuss. So, in one move, they change both the Patriarch and the exarchate. But from 71 until 82, they have once more strong opposition from the bankers, and that leads us to the events of the Easter of 72, and we reach a dead end Anthimos was the only patriarch that discussed with Bulgarians. But in September 72, we have the local council. At the local council in 72, I believe it's no longer important to look at the canon rather than the minutes. In the minutes, the detailed minutes of the discussion, one can see how important Metropolitan Verkon Neophytos was. He was the one making proposals. He was the one proposing how we should resolve the absence of agreement from Cyril from Jerusalem. So Neophytos was speaking more and more, and Joachim II was speaking less and less. Although Joachim II was the spiritual father of Neophytos, they were together even since he was in Epirus, and followed him all through his way to Constantinople. Joachim II has a group in which Neophytos II and Neophytos III participate in the same group, both the nationalist and the moderate one. So we have this group alternating between a nationalist approach and a more moderate approach. There is a certain relationship between Neophytos and the second and the third. So, to come to my conclusion, this ability of the people of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, regardless of the group they belonged to play with these political transformations, to instrumentalize modern ideology in a way that many modern thinkers would be jealous of. This is something that we should not forget. And those who say that the Patriarchate condemned the Bulgarians because of Greek nationalism, we should respond that the Patriarchate is so able in political negotiation that it was even better in that than journalists, than the counselors, than diplomats, than everyone. So here we need to see what gives this Ecumenical Patriarchate the ability to create people who are able to manage such negotiations even before or after.
Thank you very much, Professor Stamatopoulos, for your bright presentation of Orthodox ecumenism and its connotations with ethnophilitism. It's time. Now we have time for discussion. I do not think that we will be allowed to spend whole hour as it was planned because we are behind schedule, but half an hour. Well, Paul Meindorf first.
Thank you very much for all three presentations. I have a specific comment about the second, about Professor Daniela's presentation. The entire second half of your presentation dealt with the kind of extreme nationalistic views of the Russian Church in exile, the Karlovci Synod. And I think it should be pointed out that they are not representative of the whole Russian emigration, and certainly the splits which you mentioned, both in Paris with Yevlogi and in America with Platon, were precisely a very deliberate rejection of the extreme nationalism, the monarchism, the right-wing politics. I mean, don't forget, the Catholic Synod also sided with Hitler, hoping that Hitler would remove Stalin. And so, I don't want people to be left with the impression that this represents kind of the mainstream of Russian, church ideology. And in fact, both the Paris school, Saint-Serge, and the American school kind of explicitly reject that form of extreme nationalism, and in fact reject even the idea that orthodoxy can be identified with any particular political system. I mean, empires come and go, nation states come and go, even autocephalies and church structures come and go. And so one cannot absolutize any of those particular forms, as in fact the Catholic Synod in fact does.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the question. And this was new research for me done for this conference. So I was fascinated by my discovery that there is this direct link between Karlovci and Stalin. Very strange link. I didn't expect to find because most of these ideas I have associated with Stalin, and maybe I haven't elaborated very well in my presentation. I'll do it in my written paper. But I think that this link between Karlovci and Stalin has been neglected, and it is important to be known. And this overemphasis on canonical aspects that of the Orthodox churches in the contemporary world. So therefore, I put so much emphasis on this. And yes, actually, what happened, especially in Paris and Saint Serge Institute, this was a great contribution to the development of contemporary orthodoxy. And it's very interesting how the different environment reflect on the development of ecclesiology or the concepts of ecclesiology, because you see in Karlovci Synod they became very nationalistic, very focused on more formal canonical issues, while in Paris and in America, Russian diaspora developed different views and different approaches. So there is several factors that we have to have in mind when discuss this question today: the history, the experience, the environment, because it seems that we neglect this environment. Thank you.
And yes.
Approaching this issue of ecclesiology and nationalism, I think we should also integrate some of the sub-issues. We do not stress the fact that within ecclesiology, also priority soteriology, that is the pastoral of salvation. So we cannot identify the autocephalicity with the state. So we have the Church of Cyprus, for instance, which was for many years independent autocephalous church. The state was established in 1960, but we cannot also limit our reference to the history of the Orthodox Church, whereas we in the Balkans or in Southeastern Europe, there are the patriarchates of Constantinople, Alexandria, Antiochia, and these belong to states that are Muslim, Jewish, etc. And we also have the case where the state may be fighting against the church, for instance, in Albania, right? It was born through its own ashes, the Orthodox Church. So I would say that we should highlight certain aspects. For instance, I saw a list before, but the Church of Cyprus was not included there. So we are maybe introducing a form of ideology in order to speak for the entirety of Orthodoxy, whereas each local Orthodoxy has its own history, its own structures of operation. But maybe we can make some interpretations, but the everyday people who participated in the everyday life of the church were trying to save souls. Now, if later some diplomatic approaches were also influencing these processes, and we see the problems created by nationalism and by the state, but this is a different issue. And, of course, we can treat these issues through the frequent communication and encounter of our leaders and with the Orthodox, inter-Orthodox gatherings. So I would like to listen to all three speakers so as to clarify certain issues and not give the impression that the opinions of some people express the majesty of the Orthodox Church. We do not accept the term ecumenism. We speak about the ecumenical movement. Just as Paul left Jerusalem and went to Thessaloniki and went everywhere, these people were not interested in nations or ethnicities. They are trying to save man. This is the eternal aspect of Orthodox Church, which is speaking always about the salvation of man.
Shall we start with Professor Boyovich? With you. Shall we start with you?
Ναι. Κοιτάξτε, δεν θα ήθελα να επαναλάβω πράγματα που είπα στην...
I'd like to repeat what I said in my presentation, but I would like to say something that is mentioned in the minutes of the local synod of 1872. There is a condemnation of philitism as an ideology which is influenced by Judaism. We don't want to become like the Jews, where the church includes only the Jews. We will create churches where all the faithful will participate independently of their origin and ethnicity. So there is a pre-modern reference there, but there is also these splits are the opposite of what you are saying. In the minutes, they recognize that the splits in Autocephalus and other churches are an influence of the political state of affairs. That is to say, we start from that. At some point, maybe political affairs may provoke some developments where we have a church which is named after a city or after a country, but not as a nation in the narrow sense of the term. But in the Orthodox Church, we always had a realism, and we were reconciled with reality. And since we cannot keep the world united at a political level, we have to adjust ourselves to its fragmented state of affairs and to operate there based on our values, based on our value system. My own opinion with regard to the difference between the Orthodox model and the Catholic and the Protestant ones is the following. In the case of the Catholic Church, you are dealing with a church which is clashing with the emperor, with the state, because they want to put their own people inside the states and create a network of cardinals that would be controlled by the Vatican. This is the Catholic model. The Protestant model has been described by Max Weber. So we have the bourgeois society which is being reformed, and the church is part of society, so it can become national too. So you can look at the Northern Europe, for instance. In the case of the Orthodox Church, I think that we have a model of relations with the states which is very peculiar. It has to do with what Lucian mentioned in the morning, the model of sinfonia, or I would call it a model of annexation. The church attaches itself to the state, but it does not become an apparatus of the state necessarily. When its own value system is being threatened by the state, then it can exit the relationship and protect its own values. So it's in a constant regression, and this is very important for the fact that it can adjust itself to different political models. And at the same time, we have to ask ourselves whether it has also influenced the limits between public and private throughout the Eastern and Southeastern Europe. So this constant back and forth in its relationship with its states is maybe challenging this line between private and public, which is very clear, a very clear line in the West.
So concerning the Church of Cyprus, it's a very interesting question, because when I read the material, the paper of Bishop John of Shanghai, and I read it several times, and there was nothing about the Church of Cyprus, neither as localist or as autocephalous. And I think that the explanation is that by that time, in the interwar period, it was under British protectorate. And maybe he supposed it is under the Patriarchate of Constantinople. I wasn't able to find something more. This is my own explanation. But it reveals an interesting tendency, because the list of the local churches, as defined by Bishop Yuan, it was based on kind of territorial principle. Well, Count Yuri Grabe connected autocephaly with the state, because those churches that had their own state, or that were traditionally the five old patriarchates, and the other churches that had their own states, they were considered autocephalous. So, and this was, it seems to me that this was the moment when this contemporary notion of local churches, pomestnie Orthodox churches, like in the Russian language, was elaborated. This is my suggestion.
Yes.
I would like to make a question to Mr. Stamatopoulos, because I believe too that there is this diplomatic ability of the ecumenical patriarchate, but I'm always concerned that we lived through this amazing Minor Asia catastrophe and this exchange of population, and I wonder, we had so many skillful diplomats in Fanari, because their survival there is miraculous. Wasn't the Patriarchate able to intervene? Wasn't Venizelos able to use his experience? Did they consider that it was a national issue and not an ecumenical issue? Maybe they did not have the power to stop Kemal. Of course, they could not stop the military defeat, but this issue of the exchange of populations, that is that the Patriarchate was not able to keep the Greeks there. Although they were, as I said, skillful diplomats, maybe it was an issue of persons, I don't know, personalities, because we see that the current Patriarch manages these issues very well. And when I think about this exchange of population or the September events, I'm really wondering, why wasn't the Patriarchate not able to do something? It's what Toynbee says. What happened with Asia Minor, the Asia Minor disaster? It was a Western question, not an Eastern question. That is the transfer of nationalisms that destroyed a whole region. Metaxakis, Ethnagoras, these were, of course, capable people. You cannot say that they were not capable. So it doesn't have to do with skills and capabilities. It has to do with a broader geopolitical dimension. It is a wave that carries you over. The bad thing was for the Patriarchate, which was in that critical moment where the millets in the empire were transformed into minorities. And at that critical moment, and from then on, the course of things was predetermined, of course, because if the Patriarchate is identified with a minority and not with a broader flock, then necessarily the Turkish power would deal with them in the in the expected way. So the Patriarchate was trying to transcend the particularity of representing a minority. So the defense of ecumenicity in Constantinople today has this dimension too. Maybe His Eminence of Pergamon can speak his mind about that. This is a big issue. The answer given by Mr. Stamatopoulos is a little problematic for me. In what sense? Because I think that the ecumenical Patriarchate at that critical moment was internally divided. So it played a very negative role in the course of events. The policy of Metaxakis was something that did not fit the DNA of the Patriarchate. It was an alien element. And this contributed a lot to the fact that the Venizelos line was followed, and we had and the events took their own course. But so yes, the Patriarchate had its own tradition, but of course Metaxakis promoted some dimensions of ecumenism that really saved the Patriarchate. For instance, in America, the diaspora. In any case, it is a very complex institution, the Patriarchate, and it's really worth thinking about its possibilities to survive. On the same issue, I will refer only to Mr. Stamatopoulos' presentation. Mr. Stamatopoulos has indeed offered a lot in reviewing this binary that was mentioned. My own objection, we have all discussed it in other conferences, apart from the purely historical consideration of the topic, nationalism, ecumenism, let me ecumenism was treated from a different viewpoint by Mr. Stamatopoulos. Now, we as theologians, let's come back. Let's go back after the Second Patriarchate of Joachim III. Apart from the historical analysis, you are saying, don't you think that there is a theological background that had already been developing and that had been oriented orthodoxy not negatively towards the West, but had given it an ecumenical orientation, which is the official line of the Orthodox Church until today. So if we read the encyclicals of Joachim, III, the theological arguments there, are they something superficial? So why did the Patriarchate change its policy there? And the critical question is, maybe in parallel with historical data, there was also something which the theologians unfortunately have not yet examined, but maybe there was a new movement, a new wave that gave Orthodoxy the character of ecumenicity, Catholicity. Yes, we have discussed this in the past, Mr. Vasiliadis. For those of us who have not heard our previous discussion, my own point of view as a historian is that for Joachim to come back to the throne, the necessary preconditions had to be created, not those that we wrongly believe. That is, the wrong assumption is that since 1884 he was thrown out of the throne, and the Greek embassy did not let him come back. So this point of view said that when he came back, he became a little more nationalist. So very correctly you mentioned that the spirit of Joachim was ecumenical from the beginning. And why? Because the right preconditions had been established. First of all, 1895, Russia and the Ottoman Empire signed a treaty of peace. 1897, the end of the great idea. So Greek nationalism was defeated at the time, and the Ottoman Empire and the Russians were able to call Joachim back. And so Joachim wanted to make an ecumenical opening, a modern opening. It was an opening towards the Orthodox churches, but he also has to do, but the issues that he brings up have to do with the West, with the relation with the West, for instance, the issue of the calendar and so on. So he's addressing the Russian, but he's also he's also focused on the West. And this, of course, has to do also with the personality of this particular patriarch. But unfortunately for him, things changed very quickly. And the two pillars that supported his policy, Russia and the Ottoman Empire, collapsed, and so he couldn't continue his policy.
Thank you very much, Dimitris, for a very interesting paper, although it was in Greek, and I appreciate the guys at the back really working very hard. I hope I have a question, and perhaps provide. I'm not stuck in translation. That's the idea. The first question relates to your methodological approach. You mentioned various groups in the Ecumenical Patriarchate. I was wondering, how did you come up to have these groups? I mean, what exactly they did? Yes, that's definitely a group related to Bulgaria. So that's definitely a group related to Wallachia or Russia. Yeah. And how do you really become a member of that group? Is it just because the Ecumenical Patriarch is interested in that specific policy and then brings somebody in that group? Or, and this is my second question, a foreign prince is interested in a specific policy and then he helps somebody to become a member of that group. Yeah. So these two questions: how do you become a member of the group, and if a foreign prince has any influence on specific members to become a member of that group? Because I think here it's very important how we look at nationalism. I can't imagine today the Russian president or Romanian president really lobbying or making sure that they have their own metropolitan in Istanbul. So it's rather different.
In simple words, regarding your questions, Lucian, the interest groups of the Patriarchate, the three which I described in my presentation, the first one, Vogoridis' circle, was closely connected with pro-Western embassies, especially British embassy, and the same Canning, the ambassador of English embassy in the 1850s in Constantinople. From the other side, Aristarchus and Gregorius were pro-Russian. It was so clear for all of the members of the Patriarchate life that we have a classic pro-Russian, but pro-Russian after the Russian occupation of Moldavia and Wallachia in 1829, because Vogoridis and Aristarchus were Kapou Kahas, both of them in Wallachia and Moldavia, and closely connected with Sturza. He was son-in-law of Vogoridis, I think, and the other guy, Gika, I think, in the other principality. And the last one, it's the road of the last one. It's very interesting because Zarifis and Zographos, the main bankers of this circle, were pro-Russians before the Crimean War. But after the Crimean War and the augmentation of the debt of the Ottoman Empire, they turned to the Western embassies. At this time, Psycharis, the traditional leader of this interest group, adopted and incorporated these former pro-Russian bankers in his circle. And then we have an interesting transformation from pro-Napoleon III policy after Crimean War in the Ottoman Empire to a moderate confrontation of the Bulgarian radical movement from this circle. And this is the internal schism of this circle. The clerics, Joachim II and Joachim III, were moderate in order to confront the Bulgarian question. From the other side, the laic members, like Zarifis and Zographos, were connected closely with the British embassy. Zarifis in 1876 proposed a reunification of the Ottoman Empire with the Greek kingdom on the basis of the unification of Austria and Hungary to confront the Slavic danger from the north. So I think it's a very clear image to understand the function of these interest groups in the Patriarchate.
Good, thank you. I still have three questions, and I think it will be the end because we are running out of time. Well, first you.
My question concerns the second speaker. Forgive me if there is some confusion in what I'm going to say. It has to do with my lack of knowledge on the issue. But I like to see things practically. And in your presentation, you spoke about how the Synod of Karlovci saw the issue of the Russian diaspora and the existence of the non-Orthodox within its ranks. I would like to ask the following. How was this nationalism that we see in Russia at that time, how it can be connected with forms of with figures such as Saint Tycho and Saint John Maximovich in Moscow. I think that both of them had opened discussions with representatives of other Christian confessions that were considering becoming Orthodox, and they were ready to introduce a form of Western liturgy within the Russian Church. So although we are speaking about the connection between Orthodoxy and Pan-Russianism at that time, we also see some figures who are trying to remedy the splits within the churches, or to approach people from non-traditionally Orthodox countries by allowing them, for instance, to use some Western liturgy, or by recognizing some ordainments of bishops from other churches. I don't have a clear view about these issues, but I have read something, and I would like to hear your comment about it.
So I'm not very sure whether I grasp very well the question you asked me. So there is a difference. First of all, during the first council, Russian Church Council abroad, there was no clarity what will be the destiny of Russia. So at this time, this council passed under the slogan of unity, to survive for a while and to return to Russia. So almost everybody, they were united. The unity was the leading thing. But then in the 20s, between 1924 and 1930, parts of this Orthodox Church abroad left Karlovci. Metropolitan Evlogi in Paris, he developed very ecumenical activities, and actually this part of the Russian diaspora survived thanks to the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church, and they were very much involved in the ecumenical movement. In the States, the emphasis was on the balance between the citizenship, American citizenship, and the loyalty to the Mother Church and the rejection of the Bolshevik regime. Well, in Karlovci, it is only in Karlovci in the interwar period where they developed this anti-Western, anti-ecumenical, anti-Catholic kind of isolationist tendency, and somehow this vision, these concepts work very well for Stalin after the Second World War, when he promoted this division between the democratic, progressive Orthodox churches and the Catholic warmongers, and of course Greek papism. So this was the way he used for his own ideological ends. So it was like this.
Christos.
I want to make a question to Mr. Stamatopoulos. Thank you very much. I'm not an expert, but your presentation was very useful in order to understand the subtle balances during the 19th century. So this was very helpful for non-experts. I would like to make a comment on the issue of instrumentalization that you stress. As far as I understand, some of the modern elements of that time about the conception of ecumenism and nationalism are received in a selective way, so that a certain policy can be implemented. But I'm wondering whether there is also an indication that a dialogue is taking place on the part of the official church. And I suspect that there is no such dialogue. Only some elements were used instrumentally. So a broader question then, which has to do more with theology and less with history, why wasn't Orthodoxy able to create such a dialogue? Thank you. Well, dialogue is not when some people just sit on a table. There are the documents The documents are circulating from Greece. And they also have access to the Western literature. You can see the conferences of the Greek Philological Association of Constantinople, where the Patriarchate did not control this association. They have a problem with its operation. And there you can understand what is being read in Constantinople. They don't just discuss nationalism, but there are also lectures about the issue of abolishing slavery in the American Civil War, or they are discussing what's going on in America in 1860. They are discussing the issue of the interest rate, the stock exchange in the West. In my opinion, all this shows that that's the mistake that we do when we approach Constantinople. Constantinople is closer to the West than Athens. And we don't take that into account. In the 19th century, moving from Athens to Constantinople was liberation. Constantinople was a mega capital of the area. It was not a village that was transformed forcefully into a capital like Athens. It was a big city that communicated directly both with the East and with the West. So they had access to everything. And regardless of whether it was permitted to declare openly these things, the great hierarchs of that period, not only the patriarchs that I mentioned, but also the metropolitans of Chalkidon or the elders of that period, they were so educated and so receptive, and certainly they took account of Western currents. I have said many times that I would replace my dissertation with a diary of an elder, because we are not talking about priests who are just public officers of our state. We are talking about people who are moving in an imperial space. Thank you very much for all the presentations. I will ask Mr. Boye. I would like to thank Mr. Boyevich for his presentation and what he said. My question is the following. Because all the presentations are connected with each other, and because we are in Greece, the discussion focused on the Patriarchate and the Asia Minor and all these things. But I think from the way that you presented your presentations and from what we know about the ex-Yugoslavia, I think that there is a parallelism there. It seems that at some point the Greeks were able to realize the great idea vision, and we know, of course, that this vision of the great idea failed, collapsed in 1922 in a very tragic way, and 70 years later, in the beginning of the 90s, we had the impression that the Serbs were very close to realizing their own vision of Great Serbia. And this vision also ended in multiple tragedies, Krajina, Bosnia, and Kosovo. So I would like to ask you if you, that's my own interpretation, of course, but do you see an analogy between the Greek and the Serbian version of the great idea? And in your opinion, what's the responsibility of the Serbian church, especially in the issue of Kosovo? And because you concluded your presentation with the phrase of Father Justin Popovic, and because you are familiar with the current reality of the Serbian church, I would like to ask you to what extent Popovic himself or other great Serbians, other important spiritual figures of contemporary Serbia, maybe have some kind of responsibility for the cultivation of this great.
Oui, merci pour cette question. Ce parallèle est très intéressant entre Megalidea et et la Grande Serbie. J'aime bien les parallèles dans l'histoire. En ce qui concerne l'ex-Yougoslavie et la responsabilité de son éclatement et de ce qui s'est passé, j'ai récemment eu l'occasion à l'université de Berkeley de faire cette petite parallèle. Les Serbes sont les seuls qui considèrent que c'est la communauté internationale qui est responsable de l'éclatement de l'ex-Yougoslavie. Les autres ex-Yougoslaves considèrent que les Serbes sont les seuls à être responsables de l'éclatement de l'ex-Yougoslavie. Ce qui est commun aux deux, aux Serbes et aux autres, c'est que c'est toujours quelqu'un d'autre qui est responsable, et pas eux. Et ça, c'est, je pense aussi, ça peut s'appliquer à d'autres pays balkaniques. C'est toujours quelqu'un d'autre qui est responsable de leur destin. Ils ne sont pas maîtres de leur destin, c'est toujours quelqu'un d'autre qui est responsable de ce qui leur arrive. Et on pourrait multiplier des exemples dans différents pays des Balkans. Et ça, c'est une des spécificités des Balkans qui est à la fois subjective et objective. Et il y a les deux. Il y a des présupposés réels et subjectifs aussi. En ce qui concerne Père Justin Popović, je dirais que je l'ai cité volontairement pour montrer que, en fait, il faudrait réinterpréter en fait la pensée de Père Justin Popović. Je pense qu'il est abusivement interprété d'une manière très unilatérale, très univoque. Il y a une grande différence entre Nikolai Velimirović et Justin Popović. Nikolai Velimirović est un théologien, on pourrait dire, national, et Justin Popović est un théologien, est un auteur à portée universelle. Et si on attribue à Justin Popović des pensées un peu excessives, un peu unilatérales, c'est notamment à cause de certains de ses élèves qui ont publié dans son livre sur l'écuménisme, qui est un recueil d'articles, qui ont publié des choses qui ne sont pas vraiment de la plume de Justin Popović. Donc, je pense qu'il faudrait refaire un peu, en quelque sorte, réhabiliter, je n'aime pas ce mot, la pensée de Justin Popović. Donc, Justin Popović n'est pas du tout un modèle de nationalisme qui soit serbe, qui soit confessionnel, qui soit ethnocentrique. Voilà, je ne sais pas si j'ai suffisamment...
Juste un mot pour ce que vous venez de dire.
Oui.
Pouvez-vous me préciser qu'est-ce que vous entendez lorsque vous dites que ce n'est pas Justin Popović, mais c'est ses élèves qui ont fait ce livre ou ce recueil d'articles sur l'écuménisme? Parce que tous les fondamentalistes grecs, tous les jours, font appel à ce livre.
Oui,
tous les jours.
Justement.
Et c'est un livre très très dur.
Oui, sur l'écuménisme.
Oui.
Vous pensez de ce livre.
L'écuménisme, c'est l'hérésie ou c'est toutes les hérésies contemporaines.
Justement, ce livre.
Le pape, c'est l'antéchrist. Donc, c'est Justin Popović ou c'est autre qui a écrit ce livre?
C'est justement ce livre qui est sujet à controverse. C'est justement ce livre qui a été fait, je crois, je ne peux pas être plus précis, mais en partie qui a été rédigé par Artemi Radosavljević, vous savez. Et donc, il y a des pensées, il y a des choses qui sont attribuées à Justin Popović, soit qu'il n'a pas eu la possibilité de le contrôler de son vivant, soit qui ont été faites même après son décès. Donc ce livre en particulier est sujet à controverse. Et il faudrait revoir les textes pour voir quelles sont les pensées authentiques ou pas. Je pense que c'est possible parce que je pense qu'une édition critique, si on peut dire, de ces textes est possible et même en cours en partie.
Well, thank you all our distinguished speakers. Thank you all the participants. We have to close our active discussion here and continue it during lunchtime. Thank you.